Hello and welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock update for today, March 2nd, 2023. We've got a few emails we want to get to and then some items in the news. Please email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I'd love to hear from you with your thoughts, comments. I'm asking folks to kind of share their favorite classic rock memories, so we'd love to hear that. And you can follow us on Twitter, at Classic Guitar R1 on Twitter. So check that out. So let's hop to some emails here. First one, subject line, Cruz, C-R-U-Z. Message, hi there. We are big fans of your podcast and thought it might be worth reaching out to you. We are Cruz, an original indie band from Sheffield, and are really trying to get our tunes out there to a wider audience. If you could spare any time at all to listen to our music and maybe give us a share, it would mean the world to us. We'd love to jump on your podcast. That would be awesome. You can find us on all major streaming platforms, and all our links are on Linktree. Our socials are at band_Cruz on Twitter and Instagram, and Cruz Band on Facebook. So I did just follow you guys on Twitter. So thank you for the invite. And absolutely, I'll check you guys out, give it a listen, and let me know how I can help. Always looking for new music from new bands, especially new bands that appreciate the classic rock. So thank you so much. Look forward to hearing more from you guys. Here's the next email. Hello, guys. Been enjoying your podcast, but notice you haven't posted anything recently. Hope all is well. That's true. It's been a while. By the way, I would love to hear you guys talk about my favorite band, Whitesnake. I think they are awesome and totally underrated. I think most folks are familiar with the MTV version of the band from the late 80s, but the earlier stuff is even better. Take care and keep rocking. Okay, that's from Jerry. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for emailing us. It has been a while since we posted something. I'm not going to make excuses. It's just been tough for John and I to get together and do a new episode of the podcast. That's a lot of the reason why I'm trying to do more daily updates or almost daily updates, just to keep in touch with you guys, because I missed talking to you, right? And that's why I want your emails, so we hear more voices than just mine. Whitesnake, we totally should do an episode on Whitesnake. Whitesnake is a very interesting band. When we talk about that classic rock family tree, so many important pieces from that classic rock family tree have found their way into, through, around Whitesnake. And so, yeah, we absolutely should talk about them. Of course, the common thread, the only person that's been consistent in the Whitesnake history is David Coverdale. David Coverdale himself has an interesting history. He came to international prominence with Deep Purple in 74 or 75 when he came on board. He was an unknown haberdasher. I think that's what you call a guy that works in a men's clothing store, a haberdasher. So David Coverdale worked at a men's clothing store and also was a singer in a blues band. And I don't know how Blackmore ran into him or found him, but he did. And so when Gillan left Deep Purple, he brought in Coverdale, not only Coverdale, but Glenn Hughes, who'd been in a band called Trapeze. And so it really kind of changed the whole vibe of Deep Purple with Coverdale and Glenn Hughes in the band, because there were two singers at this point. They both sang. So it was interesting. And then once Deep Purple kind of, they plugged away for an album or two after Blackmore left, but then they were, by the mid 70s, they were basically done. And so right after the kind of the falling apart of Deep Purple, Richie had gone on to start Rainbow. David Coverdale starts a band. And at the time he had been looking at lots of different folks to be in the band. I think the initial band was, is it Mickey Moody on guitar? Mickey Moody and was it Mel Galley or Bernie Marsden first? I'm not sure. Moody was the first guitarist, and then I think he brought in Bernie Marsden. Bernie Marsden had actually been in UFO before Michael Schenker. So that was the first incarnation. I think Cozy Powell was on drums at the very beginning and Neil Murray on bass. I think that was the lineup. And from there, it kind of was revolved. John Lord was in Whitesnake for a while. There are kind of three eras of Whitesnake. There was the early era, and then later, early 80s, the John Sykes era, he comes in. And then the Whitesnake that everyone thinks of after that Whitesnake 87 album, that was for the MTV era, what's her name rolling all over the car in the video? Can't remember her name. You know who I'm talking about. We think of, that's a lot of folks, that's what they think of as Whitesnake, right? The video with Adrian Vandenberg and Vivian Campbell and Rudy Sarzo and Tommy Aldridge on drums. That's what people think of as Whitesnake. Well, the dirty little secret is none of those guys even played on that big 87 album. That was all John Sykes. And John Sykes did the previous couple albums before that. But the album that really broke him in the U.S. was that 87 album. John Sykes did all the guitars, had a big blowout with Coverdale. He left. Coverdale brought in then Adrian Vandenberg, Vivian Campbell, Rudy Sarzo, Tommy Aldridge, and they did the videos. The guys hadn't even met each other until they got together to shoot the videos for MTV, and then they did a tour together. But there's a lot of Whitesnake history before that. And then, of course, Slip of the Tongue, was that the next album where they brought Steve Vai in, Vivian Campbell left. So a lot of history, a lot of great musicians have been associated with Whitesnake, and we absolutely should talk about Whitesnake. So that's my promise to you, the home viewer, that at some point we will do an episode on Whitesnake. Because, man, there's a lot to talk about with Whitesnake. So that's what we'll do, Jerry. Thank you for the email. Another one. Hi, CGR. I wanted to share my music memory with you. I had a lot of older siblings, so I was listening to what they listened to or bought records of way back in the 70s. I remember just laying on my big sister's bed. I was probably only about 8 or 9 at the time, hearing her play the Eagles' Long Run album on her record player. She played it over and over and over. And I still love that album. I could share other memories, but don't want to bore you. LOL. Thank you. From Tina. Thank you, Tina, for sharing that. That's exactly what I love to hear, is those little connections we had with groups or albums or songs. And for me, nothing triggers memories more than music. It's interesting, the connection that we have with music and how it ties into our memories. It's great. I love that. Thank you, Tina. One more email here. Hi, Jeremy. Oh, speaking of Deep Purple. Hi, Jeremy. Listen to your episode about Glenn Hughes. I've always been a big fan of his since way back in his Deep Purple days, and have even gone further back to listen to his stuff with Trapeze. He's currently in the Dead Daisies, and I was wondering what you think of them. Rock on, brother. Dave G. Thanks, Dave. You rock on too. Thank you so much for the email. There's a couple things I want to talk about. Glenn Hughes, you mentioned. Glenn Hughes was in Deep Purple. Great bass player, great singer, just an interesting guy. He's been through the ringer, right? He had went through terrible addictions in the 70s and 80s, and fortunately came out on the other side and has been clean and sober for decades. And just an interesting guy. Anytime you can get an interview of Glenn Hughes, it's really good. He was in a band called Trapeze. Trapeze, speaking of Whitesnake, featured Glenn Hughes, featured, was it Bernie Marsden or Mel Galley? Oh, I think it was Mel Galley. Or was it Bernie Martin? It was one of the Whitesnake guitarists. I should know this. Was in Trapeze with Glenn and a drummer named Dave Holland. Now, Dave Holland, most of us know from Judas Priest. And sadly, Dave Holland, his last few years were not good. He passed away, gosh, about 10 years ago. He was accused and actually convicted of sexual assault of a minor. And it was kind of, it was a big disgrace. He had already been replaced in Priest by Scott Travis, but this all came out after that. He served time. He did all of this. Tragic, right? So tragic that happened. Tragic that there was a victim of that, obviously. But then as it turns out, and I don't know where the truth is on this, guys, but I've seen a couple stories about this, sadly, after his death, that much of the accusations against him, many or the accusations against him have been recanted, meaning some folks have come after the fact and said this never happened and he was innocent of all of these charges, which that's a tragedy also. So it's a tragedy if it really did happen, but it's a tragedy if it never did happen. And that Dave Holland went through all this as an innocent guy. I don't know what the truth is, but from British Steel up through, I don't know, Turbo, Ram It Down, I'm not sure. But for Judas Priest's most successful span of time, their most successful period, Dave Holland was the drummer. And you never hear him get much credit, but the guy was an excellent drummer. Just great. I was listening to, which album was it I was listening to yesterday? I was listening to British Steel yesterday. Killer drums on that album. Killer drums on Screaming for Vengeance and on Defender. I mean, he's a stellar drummer. Great drummer. So tragic if what he's accused of did happen. Tragic if what he's accused of didn't happen. Just a bad deal, a bad ending all the way around. What got me on that track? Oh, I was talking about Trapeze. So your question was, Glenn Hughes is currently in the Dead Daisies. He's currently in the Dead Daisies. I was wondering what you think of them. Okay. I'm familiar with them. I know who they are. I've never done a deep dive. I've seen some videos of them performing live. They've kind of got a revolving membership as well. I think John Corabi, who replaced Vince Neil in Motley Crue for a while, I think he was the singer. He's a super good singer. I love that guy. He was the lead singer for a while, and then he was replaced, I don't know, a couple of years ago by Glenn Hughes. And also Doug Aldrich is now in Dead Daisy. So like I said, I've had several different members over the years. What I've seen, I like. What I've seen, I like of them. So I got to check out a little more. And before I can give you a really informed opinion, I do love Glenn Hughes. I do love Doug Aldrich. So what's not to like so far, right? I'll have to check out some more before I can give you, my solid opinion on that. But thank you so much for the email. All right, really only one news item I want to talk about today, and this is about a person that we don't really think of as a rock and roll figure. But today would have been the 73rd birthday of Karen Carpenter from the Carpenters. Now, why does this matter to our rock and roll channel? Well, Karen Carpenter is one of the best singers ever, bar none. Sang like a bird, beautiful voice, beautiful person. She's a great drummer too. And as a kid in the early 70s, mid 70s, I had two older sisters, And so I heard a lot of their music throughout the house. So I grew up hearing the Osmonds and, Sean Cassidy and David Cassidy and the Carpenters. Heard a lot of Carpenter's music and never really appreciated it as a kid. But over recent years, since I've been an adult, I've really become quite a fan. And in fact, I've gone down several YouTube rabbit holes watching documentaries about Karen Carpenter and Richard Carpenter. And the sheer talent is unbelievable in the Carpenters. Not just Karen. We always think of the Carpenters as Karen and, oh yeah, and then her brother. Her brother, Richard, was really the driving force. There would have been no Karen Carpenter without Richard Carpenter. Richard Carpenter was a writer and arranger and a phenomenal pianist. And he kind of encouraged his younger sister, Karen, to sing, because she was very shy and didn't want to sing. And he was the one that kind of pushed her out and encouraged her to do that. And then at some point, remember the early days of the Carpenters, Karen was always playing drums and back behind the drums singing. And they finally convinced her to get out front. Someone else can play drums. You need to get out front and be the singer, right? And she did. And the world is a better place for it because she was a phenomenal singer, just a beautiful voice. And one of the things that I heard in the interview, and you hear it when you listen for it now, go listen to a Karen Carpenter song. But one of her friends had said, I was always amazed at how quietly she sang. I would be in a car with her in a room and she'd, be practicing singing, and she sang very soft. You could hardly hear her. And that was her volume. That was the volume she used when she sang. And you can hear on the recordings that she is very close mic'd. I mean, the mic is right up on her, and you can hear that how close the mic is and how, it's a recording technique, right? Mic placement is super important. And you feel the intimacy of how close that mic is to her, that she sang in such a quiet way, and yet her voice in many ways is so strong and powerful. Just a beautiful singer. And I remember when she passed, she also brought a lot of attention to anorexia, because until that point, it wasn't as common knowledge that there was this disease that affected so many young women. And her death of anorexia, of course, brought more attention to that. And I think it led to more young women getting help. So that was, one of the good things that came out of that tragedy. But everything I've seen, she was just a great person and, loved by millions of people, rightly so, tremendous talent. What's really cool is find a reaction video, someone doing a reaction video reacting to Karen Carpenter. I saw one, it was a young lady who was doing a reaction to Karen Carpenter. And she literally is in tears hearing her sing this song. And that's the kind of voice that Karen Carpenter has. So whether you're a hard rock fan or whatever, there are certain talents that transcend genres. And it doesn't matter what music you prefer. When you see talent like hers, you recognize it. And so I'm a big Carpenters fan, right? I know that's not hard rock, that's not really classic rock, but I just wanted to share some thoughts on Karen Carpenter today, on what would have been her 73rd birthday. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in for this update. Email me, classicguitarrock@mail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at Classic Guitar R1. We're also on Facebook and on Rumble. So check us out wherever you can find us. And of course, the podcast is available on all the major podcast platforms. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on our next CGR update. Thanks. Bye-bye.